You're watching the Mondays with Midja podcast. Midja is founder and CEO of Legal Leadership, a company specialising in the leadership training and coaching of lawyers. Get set to jumpstart your week with a shot of mojo as Midja and her guests talk all things life, love and leadership.
Hey, it's Monday and I'm Midja, and welcome to the podcast all about life, love and leadership. Now, in the studio today, I have Jodi Robertson, who is a business, life and wellness coach, and I want to welcome Jodi into the studio today.
Hi, Midja.
Lovely to have you, Jodi. Now, before my guests come into the podcast studio, I do a little bit of Googling and, stalk them on LinkedIn and through websites and I found lots of gorgeous images of you and a video, the Women of Influence video as well. But tell me something about yourself, a few things about yourself that I wouldn't have found out with my Google search.
So, I guess what you wouldn't have found out is that I speak 4 languages. I speak Japanese, Spanish and Flemish because I used to live in Japan, Chile and Belgium.
Wow.
3 different times. Probably the most fun, interesting job I've ever had was I was a golf caddy in Japan, which was hilarious. And I also taught English in Chile to the Chilean Navy.
Right, so where's favourite place to, I know you're on the Gold Coast now, but if not the Gold Coast, is there another favourite spot for you that you've lived in?
Tokyo.
I
love Tokyo. If I could go and live in Tokyo tomorrow, I'd be there.
Why is that?
Oh, it's just fabulous. I'm from Melbourne, and so I'm definitely a city girl, and Tokyo is just like the ultimate city. Like the best Italian food I've ever had is in Tokyo.
Oh my goodness.
The best Nepalese food, Afghan food. Like it's amazing. It's so much fun. You can go, you'd be out on a Saturday night and then you're just walking the streets of Tokyo, or Osaka, this is the same as well, and you'd be walking in little back streets and then you'd hear some music and you'd end up in like a little jazz bar or a piano bar. Next week might be an acid jazz bar or whatever. Like there's just so much happening. Yeah, it's really cool.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. So Jodi, tell me a little bit about what you do now in work life.
So I have a couple of different businesses, but at the moment my focus is definitely on building my coaching business.
Yes.
So I'm a business, life and wellness coach, and currently undertaking master coach studies as well.
Right.
And writing a book, and I have an online health and wellness business as well, which I love, which I've done for 15 years. And I love learning. I love studying. That's something about me. If I'm not studying, I get bored. So I'm just like constantly studying and learning. Yeah.
Hence the languages and the travel and everything like that as well.
I think it's my number one value when I did one of those values. I've done lots of those values tests, but the one that always comes up for me is love of learning. I love it.
Fantastic.
A bit of a dork.
Well, yeah. And I mean, this is a podcast about leadership, and I often say that leaders are lifelong learners.
Yeah, leaders are readers, and you never arrive as a leader. That's my big thing, is that you've got to constantly develop and learn. And I think if you do that and then you're leading by example, then your team will as well.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us about, I know your work as a coach and where people are at, I suppose, at the moment in their life, in business, some of the key points that you're hearing or some of the advice that you're working through with clients at the moment. Are there particular themes or particular issues you're seeing that are coming up right now?
Absolutely. I think it's been a tough couple of years, but I feel like we're back and people are excited again. But one of the pieces of advice that I seem to be giving in all my businesses and just in all situations at the moment would be to assume best intentions. People are doing the best they can with the resources that they have, and to see things from others' perspectives. I think when, if I have a friend or a colleague or whoever it is or a family member, if someone comes to me with a problem, they tend to come to you when you're a coach, like people like.
Yes.
And I love that. That's fine. It's always been like that anyway. I seem to be giving that advice a lot at the moment, is just assume best intentions of yourself. You know that you had good intentions. and just assume others do as well. And I think that just alleviates a lot of angst and a lot of conflict, unnecessary conflict,
Yes.
I think. And I also think another one that's been really big at the moment is separate the controllables from the uncontrollable. I remember I got this from, I'm a big tennis fan. I love tennis. I played tennis my whole life and competition tennis, and watching Rafael Nadal and Ash Barty this year, both of them, I can't remember which one of them said it. I think it was Rafael Nadal, and he said, separate the controllables from the uncontrollables and just focus on what you can control. And nothing, and the rest doesn't matter. Just focus on what you can control and don't worry about the rest. And you can apply that to life, love, leadership, all of your topics that you love talking about. And then the other one that I love that's been a big one for me in the last couple of years, I heard this about 18 months ago. I think decision making's tricky, especially for leadership. But in life we have to make a lot of decisions as well. And I think the way I apply this mantra to all my decision making now, which is if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. So I love that too. I think that's really liberating.
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, my girlfriends and I, we're applying that to shopping now. So we were at Harbour Town on the weekend, and one of my good friends, Ruth, we were in Sass and Bide, which is one of our favourite stores at Harbour. We're so excited it's now at Harbour Town. And, she tried on this top and she was like, she gave this sort of, and we're like, it's okay. And then we said that. We said, if it's not that hell yes, if this is not an outfit that you're going, I friggin' love this, this is, then, and we just left it.
Yeah.
We're like, so I love that from all areas
for shopping,
of life.
it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. One of my other rules for shopping is if I buy a pair of shoes, I have to get rid of one. Because then I'm not, hoarding.
Yes. I use the shoe closet analogy with leaders around they have to stop doing the work that they used to do.
Yeah.
Because often I find as leaders, they still continue to play the expert and do the work they've always done, and they just keep piling on more responsibilities and more duties and now more accountabilities, and they're stepping up, but they're not letting go. And I say to them, every time you step up, you have to delegate, you have to coach and mentor others to step into the space you've left behind. Otherwise, the gap becomes too large, and it's like your shoe closet is you just keep buying more shoes and you open the closet up and it's out of control.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I agree. I totally agree with that. I think that, great leadership is defined by how many other leaders, good quality leaders you have in your organisation. Absolutely. I also think that, it's important to let go and delegate. And then when I think when one of my leaders is spreading their wings, it's like letting go of a child.
Yes.
And sometimes that's really hard, but you've got to know that just like a child, if they're off in the world doing great things, a leader just needs to know that too, that if the person, that they're leading is off and they can do it, you've done your job as a leader. But I also think in leadership, can I just keep going on leadership?
Of course, go for it.
So I also think that with leadership, it's really important to be in the trenches and leading by example. They're two big things for me as well. And that's a little bit different from, piling all the work and doing it. I know what you're saying. You've got to recognise. This is where as well, I love this. This is where as well that, you've got to apply all those mantras I talked about. I think you can apply to this situation as well, as assume best intentions and know that, people are capable, and you've got to let that go. You've got to assume best intentions of yourself. And when you delegate properly to leaders and they're able to continue with what you've set out, but also have their own skills put on there. And when you can recognise different personalities, different perspectives, different skill sets, and you delegate to all those different people, it all comes together.
Yes. Yeah. So what's been some other lessons in leadership that you've learned, and maybe you've learnt the hard way, We often talk about leader shit, which is,
It's
shitty
lonely.
things we've done as
Leadership
leaders. Yeah.
can be really lonely, I think. If you do, like you were saying, if you do keep everything and you try to do it, if you try to do it all, it's really, really hard. But when you do delegate and people take responsibility for certain projects or certain things, I find leadership comes together more. But I do think, I think there's no place for ego in leadership. I remember when I hit a certain level in my business and, you think you've arrived as a leader, and I think that's when problems happen. When you think you've arrived, you never arrive as a leader. I think you've always got to be learning, always got to be growing. And I think the bigger the leader you are, the further along in your leadership journey you are, the bigger the problems that will come and the bigger the test for your ego too. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I often, I say to leaders that often people are always looking at you, even if you're not even aware of it. They're watching and they're interpreting everything. I remember being at the Disney Institute in Orlando, and they have it's like a Disney university, if you like, for Disney staff, and they run external programs. I was there for an external program, and they showed us like behind the scenes where they call them cast members. Everyone that works at Disney is just called a cast member, not an employee, but a cast member. And where the cast members come in and they have lockers and they get changed for, beginning work in one of the Disney parks. And before they walk out onto the park, there's this big sign saying, you are now on stage. And so as they walk through that door, they know that then they're Disney and they're leaders and they're on show. And, that's a tough gig for leaders. I get that can be tough, but it is the fact that people are watching and observing.
And I think also it's about being in the arena, like Brene Brown talks about. I think there's two parts to that. You have to be brave. You have to have courage as a leader, and you have to let go of what other people think of you. And you're never going to please everyone. You just have to let that go.
Yes.
And you just have to let it go. But part of being in the arena is also being the brave one, leading first, getting out there, being on show, like you said. But it's also about having the tough conversations. I think a bit like John C. Maxwell. We all love him. He's the leadership guru, and he says you've got to be a candid but caring leader. So I think that's really important. And part of being a candid and caring leader is getting in the arena and having the guts to have those really honest conversations with people, because sometimes something will happen and you'll go, oh, you can just let it slide. But if you let it slide, there might be a lesson for that person to learn. And they might not like you in that moment, in that conversation, but when they walk away, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful we had that happened. Because I've had, when you have mentors and leaders that give you those little wake-up calls, I remember in the moment your ego's a little bit bruised and you're like, oh, that hurt. But then you walk away and you go, oh my gosh, I'm so glad they kicked me in the butt.
Yes.
I'm so glad that we had that conversation, because then it's a lifelong lesson then.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember, being in the law firm for a very long time, and there were decisions made, it didn't go my way for promotions or whatever opportunities. And at the time I was like, how dare they? I cannot believe they don't think I'm ready to be partner. And then, it didn't take long, maybe a few months, a year or so. And now I look back and go, oh my goodness, of course, you were so great. Who did you think you were? But at the time, the feedback cuts through.
Yep.
But it was absolutely what I needed. And there was a whole lot of work I needed to do before stepping into some of those positions. Yeah. So, Jodi, why do you think, because these are conversations I have all the time with very senior, accomplished leaders who sometimes have to make really tough calls, but these conversations with the people in their teams, and some of these, I call them courageous conversations, still they struggle with that. So, apart from just doing it, and I guess the key message you've gave around, assuming best intentions first, any other tips around, dealing with issues we might have in the team, giving that type of feedback? Now, what's worked for you?
Well, I guess it's never having the conversation in front of others, and that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, like it's my Bible. It's one of my favourite reads.
That.
Never making anybody feel small in front of other people is, so important about where you have the conversation and how. And I think it's also about, that old cliche saying of, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and building the relationships. When you have great relationships with your team and you build rapport and trust, then it's those conversations, you can have them. You shouldn't have a problem with having them. But if you don't have that rapport and you don't have that trust with your team, it's going to be a lot tougher.
Yeah. And it's a little bit around all of that work you do with a team or people that you work with, even when things are going really smoothly and things are going really well. But as you said, building that rapport and that connection and that trust so that when things are not going so well, you've got that emotional bank account and all of that currency there that you can come in and have the conversation that needs to be had.
Absolutely. And also team culture, building all of that is just that's key to all of, and that's
some tips around that culture building for you.
Oh, bring in the fun.
Yes.
Bring in the fun.
Well, yeah,
There's
you're
not
a ray
enough.
of sunshine.
Like they're just bringing
Jodi.
the fun and the positivity and building people up instead of tearing people down. Like you got to have the honest conversations, all of those things, but make people feel good about themselves and empower people, them, and don't think you know everything. Let other people take responsibility for, things as well. That's, connected to what we were saying before. But I also think that it's really true that great leadership, it's easy when things are good.
Yes.
But great leadership is even more important when things are tough, and we've all had tough times, the last couple of years. And I think that it's also knowing, and reassuring your team that when they are in the pit, that is where the biggest growth happens. And you don't know it at the time, but until you've been in the pit, when you're out of the pit, that's when you're like, yeah, this is what I learned from that. And it's not about, that toxic positivity or any of that. It's not about that. It's not about,
pretending
it's not about pretending. And of course there is
a
silver lining in every situation. But the silver lining is that the growth that you learn from the crappy times.
Yes.
And you are going to have really hard times in life, love and leadership in all areas.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to feel the feels and, be in the pit, but don't stay there. Just get yourself, know what are your things, what do you need to do to, protect your energy. Like you've got to have, as a leader, you've got to have energy. For me, that's the number one thing. You've got to have so much energy and stamina. And so what do you do to protect your energy? So what I mean by that, for example, is obviously looking after your health and, what do you do for joy? What do you do for fun? What brings you energy? That's really important, because if you're putting on your oxygen mask, as they say, you can help everybody else.
Yes.
And when you've been in the pit, what did you do to get yourself out? So next time you are in the pit, you remember those things that you did.
Because personally for you, Jodi, because I know, the energy you bring to, every interaction and your work, and what's that look like for you? Like insofar as like routine wise or a cadence you have around keeping up that energy?
It's really simple things. It's, making sure that I get enough sleep.
Yes.
Looking after what, I follow the 80-20 rule with what I eat. 80% of the time I try to be pretty clean with my eating, and then 20% of the time I can do what I like.
Yes.
It's, cutting down processed sugar, drinking plenty of water, cutting down on alcohol has been a big one for me. And that's made a really big difference.
Yes.
Meditation, at the start of the pandemic, I've definitely suffered from anxiety in the past, and I'm prone to that. And meditation has been life-changing for me. And when I start to get that overthinking or waking up in the night and not being able to go back to sleep, it's, okay, I need to get back to meditating daily. That's made a big difference for me. And also just doing big brain dumps, just getting it out of your head and getting it onto paper and your to-do lists, and just moving forward in that way, just simple things. And also reducing multitasking. I think you're so much better to focus on one thing, one task, get that done properly, like from that book by Gary Keller, The One Thing.
Yes.
So any, massive multitaskers out there listening to this, if you want to learn to focus on one thing, you need to read that book. But when you're multitasking on too many things, have all these notifications, and I've switched all my notifications off as well on my phone, and that made a really big difference, so that when I am in the space of, getting something done in flow, then I'm not being distracted.
Yes.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. It was so funny. I went to the movies for the first time on the weekend in about probably 6 or 7 years.
Wow.
So I'm not a movie person. I just feel, I don't know why, but I have this thing of, I feel like it's a waste of 2 hours of my life. I don't know why, but just doing the one thing seems like a waste.
Mm-hmm.
It's just craziness. And yeah, I did think, oh my goodness, like I'm watching something and I'm not on my phone, or I'm not also reading, or
Fully
I'm not
present.
also cooking, or I'm not also, because everything I do all day, I'm, thinking I'm multitasking, which I'm just microtasking and just like, shuffling from one to the other and using a whole lot of brain space that makes me very tired by the end of the day. But certainly I find that this technology piece and just the busyness, right?
Yep.
The busyness of life. And I know you wear lots of different hats.
I do.
So, yeah, some interesting points there around how we can actually be where our feet are.
Do you know
be present.
Do you know one of the most profound things I've realised in the last 2 years is the power of the pause. So if you literally just pause for a moment, you just watch all the creativity flood into your brain even more when you do be in flow and allow yourself to be in the moment. Yeah, and when you stop multitasking, because I wear a lot of hats like you.
Yes.
And I just try to wear 1 or 2 hats at a time.
Yes.
Instead of all 5 all the time.
Yeah, lay it on top of each other.
Yeah, I separate my time, and I go, right, today's hat is this. And then if the other hats float into my mind, I go, no, that hat's for this time, and I let him pop out again.
Yes. I love that, getting everything out of your head as well, because I think many of us, I know particularly many of our listeners are people that, may be employed, they may be having some side hustles. A lot of them have, family responsibilities and lots of other stuff going on as well. Being able to get it out, because it's all floating around in their head, that anxiety piece that we spoke about, that overwhelming piece, a lot of those words that I imagine you hear as a business and life coach as well.
All the time. And, that one of the big tips for your listeners for reducing overwhelm and getting it out of your head is doing a big brain dump regularly. Every Sunday I do a big brain dump, and I have a separate sheet of paper or a page in my notebook for each hat that I wear. So I just have big to-do lists, and then it's out of my head. And then every night I do another brain dump before I go to sleep, so that when I wake up in the night, I'm not being awoken by those thoughts. It's out of my head.
I love that, because as we're sitting in the podcast, I'm
Little
like,
practical tip.
yeah, I'm thinking about the car needs to go in for a service, and then I need to ring the doctor back
Get
for
it out
that
of your
appointment, and all of that is running around. I love that. And then it probably impacts the quality and depth of your sleep.
Absolutely.
As well.
Massively. So I still wake up, in the night sometimes, but I don't. I go straight back to sleep now instead of lying awake going, oh my gosh, all these things going on in your head. So that's the advice I've been giving my clients too, and it makes a huge, huge, huge difference.
Yeah.
That little brain dumping.
Yeah, love that. Okay, Jodi, as we've spoken about, this podcast is also about love. And I am on a bit of a mission to find big love.
Love that.
I feel like it's my time, I think. So, and at some point in this podcast, I really want to announce and shout to the world about this wonderful love story, or take my listeners through the journey of the love story. So I've taken a bit of a dive, but it is winter. I do tend to go into a little bit of hibernation during winter.
It's nice.
It's nice.
Hibernating's fun.
Yeah, I think I'm just getting stories and advice. So come spring, I'll spring out there into the love life again. Tell us a little bit about love in your life, Jodi, and your kind of love story, if you like.
Well, I'm an all-in person. I'm an
all-in. I love that.
I'm such an all-in. So my big advice for you, Midge, is just be all-in, baby. That's my first thing. So, oh my gosh. So my love stories are serendipitous, absolutely.
Okay,
so,
tell us about that.
I was married in my 20s.
Yep.
I was on a scholarship at university in Tokyo, and I got eloped to my first husband, who was from Chile. We were both on scholarships.
So you met there? You met working there?
We were studying at university. Doing
Did you know straight
studies.
away? Did you have a feel that he was like the one early on in your relationship?
Well, 1 month. So yeah, it was one of those just blinding love moments.
Wow.
So I'm really lucky to have had that twice in my life. Like I'm so lucky. But where the funny story is, so my parents, they're both in heaven now, but my parents, they met when my dad was, he was coming home from, he was on his way home from Vietnam. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was conscripted. Anyway, he was on the train coming back from Darwin, and he met my mum. They were engaged in a month, married within 6.
Wow.
So I rang my dad from Tokyo and I said, Dad, do you remember how you and Mum met? Yes, Jodi, what are you doing? And I said, well, I've just got engaged and I'm getting married. So I eloped in Tokyo, my poor family. So that was the first time. And we were married for 5 years.
Okay.
And then that didn't work out. And then he ended up passing away from leukemia a few years ago, and my now husband, and that's my next serendipity story that I have to tell you, but my now husband, he shaved his head to raise money to bring my ex-husband's wife over from Chile while he had leukemia treatment.
Okay, I'm just processing that,
So
Jodi.
isn't that beautiful? So for me, that's love, is an act of kindness. So for me, love is really, an act of kindness. But so my now husband, our story was, we were working, we used to work in the hotel business. So we were working and colleagues, and we got set up, we got match made. So his marriage fell apart, my marriage fell apart. And then we were just friends at work, and we're going through heartbroken, not wanting to go home, all the rest, stay till whatever hours. So we got match made. That some friends of ours said, will you come to Tom's? He's invited you. And they said to me, I said to him, can we bring Jodi? Yeah. Anyway, I walked into his apartment for the first time that night, and I had this feeling, this wash come over me that I'd come home.
Wow.
It was like a Gwyneth Paltrow moment. Like I literally walked into that apartment, and we had only ever been friends until that moment, and then I walked into his apartment and I knew I'd come home. and that was it. Where we were, we fell in love that night.
Yes.
And yeah.
So then you'd found out that he had the other story? Was that just a connection piece that you didn't know, that he brought your ex-husband's?
Oh, no. So that happened later. Sorry.
That happened later.
That
okay.
happened later. So we'd been married and had a child and everything.
Yes.
And then my ex-husband moved back from Chile to Australia to get some treatment for his leukemia.
Right. Yes.
And when that happened, we were raising money to bring his wife over so she could be with him, his new wife, so that she could be with him while he had his treatment. And my ex-husband and brother-in-law both shaved their heads to raise money for him.
Yes.
Yeah, for his wife to come over. And for me, that shows it's a beautiful example of love. It's a beautiful act of kindness. And it's a beautiful example of putting your differences aside and egos and, you know, the past is the past and forgiveness, all of those things.
All of those things.
Like, I don't know what I would do if I hadn't have, because, you know, it didn't end well between my ex-husband and I and my late ex-husband. But we had put all of that, we'd forgiven each other and put all of that aside. And when he passed away, I'd had closure and forgiveness.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. It's often, I don't know about you and your experience with this, I've found, obviously I'm divorced and been divorced about 7 years now. It's an interesting thing because often my ex-husband, of course, we see each other every week because, you know, we've got children together and so forth. And I just find it, I don't know, interesting is not the right word, but it's just, I'm just going to throw interesting as a word there, that we were so close, you know, like for 20 years and the birth of 3 children and just each other's world for 20 years. And now there's such a, hello, hi, how are you doing? Good, do this. It's, you know, obviously it's very transactional now. But there's sometimes I just catch myself looking at him, or, you know, particularly if he walks away with, you know, one of the kids into the car, or often it's something I think about a lot. I just go, wow, just the change in the relationship and the feeling and all of that. And, we didn't have a whole lot of huge animosity, or there wasn't a huge moment for us. It was kind of, you know, just a series of small things and circumstance and everything like that. But yeah, certainly I'm in the space of wishing him and his new wife and all that, wishing them well and all of that, because I think that'd be a lot to carry around if you were still angry and resentful and, you know, all of that and all of those feelings of, you know, it's like drinking the poison yourself and hoping that it impacts them. It doesn't. They get on with their lives, and that choice piece, I guess. Yeah. What did you say before around what you can control?
Yeah, focus on what you can control.
Yes.
And and forget about the rest. But I think it's a completely different dynamic when you've got children. We didn't have kids.
Yes.
But I think it's even more important that you're able to do that, to show the children, you know, and it is sad. You've got to grieve that loss. You've got to grieve, you know, that you know, and on one hand it's sad because you have to grieve the relationship, but then on the other hand you go, no, we rocked it for 20 years.
Yes.
We were awesome.
Yes.
And we're good mates now, and good on you. I think that's really, really wonderful that you can do that and show that example for the kids.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. It's a tough one, and I think for a lot of people, you know, particularly with kids, you kind of, like, I feel, you know, a whole lot of guilt around not having the family unit and how things worked out and all of that. And I sometimes put the rose-coloured glasses on, which sometimes doesn't help. Sometimes I go, could I have, should we have? And some of my good girlfriends, then, you know, they life coach me a bit.
Yep.
And they go, Midge, remember, remember what it was like, remember some of those feelings, remember what wasn't working. I'm like, oh, yes, I forget those things sometimes.
You're only human, so you are going to have those feelings, and I'm so glad you've got that support crew around you that can be, you want to have the truth, those being in the arena with you, right?
Yes,
you want to have those
absolutely.
friendships, and it's really good that you have that. But I also think, you just mentioned guilt.
Yes.
So on the vibration scale of emotions, guilt and shame are at the lowest, lower than anger and all of those things. So, you've had to go through that process of change, and then guilt's going to be that last piece that you'll be able to let go of. You've gone through the sadness, you've gone through the anger, and now you're just going to let that go.
Yes.
You're going to let that guilt go.
And find big love,
and
Jodi.
you're going to find big love. I know it. There's going to be a serendipitous moment for you, Midge. I just know it.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. We just had a moment in the podcast studio that we're going to share. So I've had a couple of guests on this morning. Obviously, we've been talking about love. Jodi rocks into the studio here, was sitting at the table, and in that moment, I got a text from a fellow who I dated pre-pandemic. So what would that be, 2019, around that sort of time? And out of the blue, I have not spoken to him. There was a situation with a group of friends, his group of friends, and so forth. It's a long story. I'd have to do a whole podcast on that piece, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. And I just got a text from him as we're sitting here, and Jodi had goosebumps. It was just a very, text of, I mightn't say too much in case he listens to the podcast. Yeah. But it's just those moments. And those moments happen to me all the time, Jodi.
It's the best.
Where just
my cheeks are hurting from smiling so hard.
I'm talking about something, and boom, it happens. Or I'll be talking about like an old colleague or something, or an opportunity something I'd love to do, and then boom.
What you focus on grows, right? You are your thoughts. Your thoughts are your results, and you're an example of that.
Yeah.
My cheeks are hurting from grinning for you, Midge.
So let's watch this space, people. Now, Jodi, we end the podcast with talk about message from the universe.
Okay.
With these little cards that I bring to like coaching and mentoring and workshops and everything. And I'm going to get you to choose one of them. So I have two boxes today. I have Carpe Diem or Dream. Which box do you want to choose for your message from the universe?
100% dream, because my business is Dream Big.
It
coaching,
is,
so
of course.
I'm a big dreamer. I have my whole life.
We'll get Jodi to pick a card and see what the message is.
Really excited.
Yeah, there we go. So you pop open the front.
Oh, yep.
So it's a little pop open. Let's see what it says.
Oh, I love this. Nurture your mind with great thoughts.
Oh, love that. Great thoughts, mindset, all of this good stuff we've been talking about. Jodi, it's been absolutely a delight to have a chat to you in the podcast studio. I've taken so much away. I've learnt lots about you that I didn't know as well, so I always love that. Where can people find you, connect with you, best places?
Yeah, so I'm probably more active on Instagram and Facebook. I'm definitely need to get into the LinkedIn space a bit more.
And it's Jodi with an I, isn't it?
Yeah, Jodi with an I. So Jodi Robertson Coach is my Instagram handle, and Jodi Robertson on Facebook. And I have a website, Dream Big Coaching. That's my coaching business, and I'm also very active for women of influence, and my Arbonne business, and my family and my friends, and I wear lots of different hats.
Love that. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Jodi.
for having me.
It's been a pleasure. And this is a wrap for our podcast this week. I hope you have a fabulous week ahead. I hope you go out there and you sprinkle your magic and your sunshine in life, love, and leadership. I'm Midja, and thank God it's Monday.
We trust you enjoyed this episode of the Mondays with Midja podcast. Host Midja Fisher is a leadership expert, keynote speaker, coach and facilitator. To find out more about Midja, visit midja.com.au or follow her on Instagram at Midja Fisher. And make sure you subscribe, share and leave a review.